You like Nicktoons? Well, today we're going to talk about a Nicktoons game. And that game is Nicktoons and the Dice of Destiny. This was a game that I actually was really heavily surprised. I was really excited to play, mainly because of the fact that it just looked a lot different from other Nickelodeon games. Game Mail, obviously, from the fact that they made a lot of the other Nickelodeon games, minus the SpongeBob games, they actually had a notorious record of different bad games, whether if it's the Mario Kart clones or the Super Smash Bros. Clones. But for some reason, this was a game that was quite different from other Nickelodeon titles that they have done. This time they decided to tackle on the RPG element of the Nicktoons. And I gotta say, this game actually looked very interesting for me for the fact that it actually looked quite different. And I think that's kind of why I wanted to try it out. So I decided to try the game out after many people saying that it was actually quite decent and everything, and it kind of sparked my interest a little bit since I do like the Nicktoons myself. I mean, I grew up with a lot of the Nickelodeon cartoons, ranging from SpongeBob, Very Odd Parents, Danny Phantom, Jimmy Neutron, etc. Like I've actually watched a lot of the other old school Nicktoons from ranging from the 90s to the early 2000s. I mean, I watched a lot of the early 2000s stuff, but regardless, I grew up with a lot of these Nicktoons, and I was really excited to play these games. And it has to have been a long time since I've actually seen like a crossover Nickelodeon game. I think the last one we had was the Nickelodeon Attack of the Toy Bots, which I thought that game was actually quite mediocre, especially with the graphics and everything. But it still was a lot of fun, regardless of the bad graphics and the dog shit gameplay and everything. It still was pretty good. That being said, though, when it comes to this game, I thought I would give up my thoughts on what I thought about the game and some things I liked about it and some things I didn't like about it. I'm not going to go too in depth with the story, obviously, since I know there's going to be a lot of people that are really interested in playing this game. And honestly, I don't really want to spoil for anybody who's interested, since it is actually a really, really good game. However, in terms of the premise of it, it's pretty much you have all the Nicktoons coming together into this little Dungeons and Dragons kind of world, and your basic main goal is just to kind of get everybody back in their worlds. And that's pretty much the conjustice of it. And the way they kind of do this game, I think, is actually pretty good. But like I said before, we're going to talk about a little bit most about the game. And most of the characters that you play in this game, I mean, they consist of different wide range of different characters, ranging from SpongeBob, Very Odd Parents, Danny Phantom, Avatar: Last Airbender, Ninja Turtles. I mean, there's a whole bunch of characters they add in this game, and I gotta say, when it comes to the characterization in a lot of the game, I think it's actually pretty good. The interactions with the characters, I think, are pretty cool. The cutscenes, I think, are pretty excellent. It's something that I haven't seen in a long time in a Nickelodeon game, where like you see a lot of characters all interacting, and you pretty much see it as it works out. I actually think it's kind of really cool. However, in terms of the other characters, I do think they could have added other Nicktoon characters, but maybe that might be something they might do for DLC. But regardless, I really enjoy a lot of the interactions with all the characters, and playing as all the characters I think is also pretty cool as well. I started playing as Leonardo, as you guys know, as a Ninja Turtles fan. That's kind of the character I've always been playing as. I also kind of played as SpongeBob, and all the characters, including Leonardo and SpongeBob, all have their own abilities and their own level ups and their own weapons and armor. Which I gotta say, when it comes to the level up system, I think is actually pretty good. I really enjoy a lot how you do with that as well. Even though in some areas, like the progression with how you level up, it can be a little bit tedious, but I still think the level up system is actually pretty good. The bosses are actually pretty unique as well. I really enjoy a lot of the bosses. They each have their own different bosses, and each of the bosses I think are pretty cool. In terms of the gameplay, I think the gameplay overall is pretty good. The gameplay to me kind of reminds me a little bit like Hades in a sense, but since it is an RPG and it's a little bit like an MMORPG, it kind of reminds me a little bit like old school RuneScape in a way, where like you're basically kind of roaming around and you're just kind of like, it feels like more like an MMO game, which is kind of nice. So honestly, the gameplay really reminds me of those kind of games, but in terms of everything, I think the gameplay is pretty solid. The only thing I could say about the gameplay that I don't like is that there's times where I could be going to an area and I could be easily stuck and you have to restart the level. I didn't really like that all that much, but other than that, the areas are actually pretty good. And the way they kind of do the areas, I think, are actually pretty creative as well. Like, some of them I really like is, like, references from different of the shows, such as, like, Bikini Bottom Share, I thought was kind of cool, and the Fire Nation. I mean, each of them I think are pretty cool as well, and they're really cool to kind of go revisit and do different objectives and different missions, which, in this game, there's a lot of side quests, which I really like. Sometimes the side quests can be a little bit tedious because you can be going back to an area and then do another one and then beat a boss and do another one. It can be a little bit tedious at times, but I still really enjoy them a lot. So honestly, I do like that a lot. Most of this game overall, I think, is actually pretty good. I think in terms of an RPG game, I think is actually really well done. And the other thing I really like as well is the voice acting. I mean, the voice acting for the characters, like I mentioned with the characters themselves, I actually do think it's kind of interesting they added voice acting because Obviously, it was kind of a big deal from the previous Nickelodeon game that they had, which is All Star Brawl, where they didn't add any voice acting whatsoever. Which, in my opinion, I actually thought that was actually a big problem because, I mean, you can't have a game of Nickelodeon and not add any voice acting. I mean, obviously, because it was a smaller budget at the time and it was a smaller company. Because then again, Gameville is pretty much like the THQ of this decade, where they started out as making a lot of licensed games, but then obviously the budget was kind of a little bit small. But in terms of like how the voice acting was in that game, I mean, they could have added it anyway. But regardless, it was nice to see that they started getting better and better with adding voice acting in their games now. And you're starting to see that a lot with their previous titles. But with this game, it was nice to see that you could hear a lot of the voice actors from doing all the characters. So it was really nice to see that. So in terms of everything, I think the game overall is actually a lot of fun. And I think for people that actually really like RPGs, and there might be some people that may be put off in this game, which I completely understand. I mean, obviously it is kind of a licensed kids game, and I understand that. I know for some people the gameplay could be a little bit off-putting, especially for a lot of RPG junkies. They may not like it for what it is, especially if it's Nickelodeon. They might be put off from it. But honestly, for me, who actually grew up with a lot of Nickelodeon games, like ranging from SpongeBob and other Nickelodeon characters, I actually think this game actually was a lot of fun, and I spent a lot of time playing this game and really enjoyed it. I actually was really surprised. I found myself really liking this game for what it is, because at first I was really a bit put off from it, because obviously for me, if you guys have seen a lot of my content from the other channel, I'm not the biggest fan of Game Mill as a company when they've made a lot of mediocre games. And even though the Looney Tunes Sport game actually was probably one of their better games, I also do think that this game is one of their better games as well. And I think Game Mill, if they can make games like this where they can come up with like better games and better ideas, and they can make games like this where they can kind of make something new and different, I think it could work out for them, because this game overall does have that kind of uniqueness to it, where like they could try something new especially with the Nickelodeon IP, they could do something like that. But honestly, when it comes to this game, I really enjoy this game. It's definitely a game that I was really surprised I really would like, and I think for people that kind of want to get started to maybe the RPGs, or perhaps maybe for kids, that this could be a good beginner for them, since I know there's a lot of RPGs that kids wouldn't be able to play, especially for like a lot of the other games nowadays. But it's a good thing that we have this game that can get them into it, and I think it's a perfect game for kids to try out, especially if they love Nickelodeon, they love all the characters. I think this is kind of a great game for them to start. So honestly, in terms of the Dice of Destiny, I think this game overall is a lot of fun. Probably not up there as one of the best RPGs, but I still think that it's still a fun game. And for the time I put in this game, I think it's excellent. And honestly, I probably would want to play it even more, especially with the fact that this game does have a lot of content stuff. I do think that this game should have more DLC and maybe perhaps like add more areas and add more things. I think could be kind of interesting to kind of keep the game alive. But overall, I think the game is pretty good, and honestly, I think I recommend for anybody who's really into RPGs, or maybe just like Nickelodeon and they really like playing a lot of the old school Nickelodeon games. I highly recommend it for them, or maybe perhaps for kids. This would be a perfect game for kids to try out. I do think this game definitely should be a little more cheaper instead of being like more in the $50 range. That was one of the things I didn't really like about it, was the fact that this game was actually $50. In my opinion, I think if this game was around the $40, maybe the $35 range, I think this game would be a little bit more worth it. But honestly, for people that want to try this game out, I highly suggest maybe wait for a price drop, or perhaps maybe when it's on sale. So honestly, I definitely like this game a lot, and I highly recommend anybody to try this game out. But anyway, guys, that's my review of Dice of Destiny. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.